How's it going, everyone? We're working on a new series here. This is going to be dealing with joints and making attachments for wood. We're starting off the first part of this series with a fun, simple project that kind of gives you a well-rounded understanding of the whole theory and basis behind how I do things, how I make attachments and joints. We're going to start off with a bookshelf made with multiple slabs of wood and jointed together, not using any nails or screws. So follow along, hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, how's it going out there in YouTube land? We're going to work on a little fun project, something not typical that I have showed on my channel. I'm getting more into this now. It's something I've done for a long time. I just haven't made any videos on it. I'm gonna work on building shelves and benches, and I'm starting my video series on making attachments. Just see how that pin slides right in there. And tap it down. This'll hold pretty good, especially when I get the tabs cut for these two. See, it's pretty sturdy now. This is how I make most of my benches. I like to make them with the tabs. The little wedge. This is just for the shelf, for the saw bench. I like making these slab wood benches, whatever you want to call them. So I'm going to go through just the basics. To do these, you want to do one shelf at a time to keep everything square and true. You do one shelf at a time, put it back together, take it apart. This is just this is going to be the top. It's just a leaf carving that I did, relief, and a slab, and I just cut top notches. I can do like a split here and then put a wedge in and pound it in to tighten that up if I want, but because these are going to have pins, wedges in them, I don't really need to tighten this up. This is just for a top shelf, and I needed to put this to use, and I think it's going to be kind of cool. This is going to be kind of my display area. This is going to be kind of where I put the DVDs, things like that. Oh, I set this one first so it looks like a bench with really tall sides. And then I go and I set this one, right? And I get it even to, I get the bottom of it even to the bottom of this one, right? So if we stand back, so first I put that slab in and I cut the holes for the pins, get it tight, and get it, all knocked in. And then I go up and I set this one and I measure off of the bottom of this one to the bottom of this one. Why do I measure bottom to bottom and not top to bottom or top to top? Because these slabs are chainsaw milled. They're irregular. They will, this one here, actually, if we were to measure it, if you were to measure the ends of this one, this is why I do this. There's 2.5. And there's 2. So your shelf space is going to be a little bit crooked. I mean, you can do it the other way if you want, but I don't mind I don't mind my DVDs sitting a little bit crooked, and it looks straighter too. If your bottoms are all flat and even with each other, everything looks straighter, and it's easier to build. If you just measure off of your bottoms, everything is measured off of the bottom. So when I do here, because I have this set, now we're going to make a fourth shelf. I measured down to here, and I measured down to here, and that's still going to be the bottom of that last slab. And that's why I go bottom to bottom, because I measure the bottom here from the bottom there, right? So say that's 17 or whatever, we go 17 up, gets it even, right? And then I measure the full length of this, and I measure off of the bottom of this slab and off the bottom line of this slab. So I take two measurements here. I measure the full length and off of the bottom line of that slab to the bottom line for this slab. Then I set this slab. Then I go in and I measure down to the bottom of this slab. From here, measure down. And then I cut this slab in. Same thing here. I measure down for the bottom of that fourth slab. So everything sits, because you can have a gap on top. And this is why I don't worry about unevenness on top, because I'm going to be sanding these. It's all going to look right when it's done, and it looks right now. It looks pretty good to me. Your tops can be irregular. It's natural wood. I know it's not orthodox to do it this way, but when I do stonework, this is the same way that I do stonework. There's a whole variation there too, but this is my method for dealing with irregular wood. Figured wood, is that what they call it? Anything that's natural. You want to create a center line. We have our slab here that we are working with. I got a new tripod. It's not as tall as the old one. I might have to switch to the old one. Now we're going to want to use a square, and we're going to want to have a tape measure. And we're going to want a pencil. Those are the three things that I use for doing this whole deal. Things like this, they're going to get cleaned up later. It's all going to be sanded, so you'll never know in the end where it was at. Now the distance between the inside of my two sides, I know was about 37, just a tiny bit over. So to keep things tight, I'm going to go just a little over 37. So 37 minus 47 is going to be 10. So it's going to be 5 on each. So if we go, there's 47 and a half. So if we go back to 42, it's going to give us just over, well, let's be fair here. Split the difference. 42 and a quarter. And then we're going to go 5 and a quarter. So 5 and a quarter and 42 and a quarter is going to give us 5 on each end. You can always double check if you're, 5 and a quarter on each end. And 5 and a quarter. We know that because we did that. If you're like me, you might be that anal to where you will double check everything. I will double check my stops there, just to, just keep myself in check. Okay, so I lied. There's one more tool we're going to use, just because straight edge, one big straight edge is always easier. There's tool number 4, because one big straight edge is always easier to see where you're ranging in. I mean, there looks about good. Really, I I could be real persnickety about it. I could go out and measure the width of each of my sides. But the other thing that I will do, and this is what we're going to do now, I'm going to go out and I'm going to show you a trick here that I use anyway for ranging in on irregular things. It's called gauging. And it's not a real precise method, but it does work for most of these things. So we have our heights marked here for that next shelf, but we don't know front to back where it wants to sit here. And what I did to get this shelf centered in was I came up with a measurement somewhere here along the lines. There is, I think there's a 2-inch, I believe it was 2 inches. Yeah. So 2 inches, I measured off of my notches, right? The back line, this is the back line for both of my notches. There's a back line right here. Now, that line that I showed you is where the backs of these notches was cut off from. Now, I measured back 2 inches off of that line and used the square. I used the square to go straight up from that 2-inch mark and make a nice square line. So here's the cool thing here. Now that we have 2 inches and 2 inches, we can go in with the pencil and mark our 2 there. And there's just enough line left. See, this is why I make that back line. This is one way to gauge. The real way to gauge something is to get a center mark in here somewhere. You're measuring, basically you would take that 4-foot level, you'd make a line, you'd set this this slab within that line, and then you'd use a table or something. And then you'd make an outside line straight, you'd make parallel lines, you'd measure that, and then you'd split it in half, and wherever it came out in half off of those 2 lines while it's sitting in between them is your center. And then to get your 2 inches, you're measuring whatever your measure here is to that 2-inch mark, and whatever your measure there would be to that 2-inch mark. But we're not being that precise. We're just trying to stay within range right now. So if I have my 2 inches here, and I have my 2 inches there, but over here, over there I have over 4 inches of wood behind this, and over here I have just over 2. Now our front measurement off of the front of this slab, basically what I did here was I just plumbed off of the front of this slab. That was how I got everything even, by plumbing off of the face of this slab, you know, just getting a general in the corner to corner, making that plumb line, and then I measured to the 2-inch back mark. So there's 8 3/4, 8 7/8, 8 3/4, 8 7/8, somewhere in there. It doesn't have to be precise. It's not precise. You can get really precise with it. So to range this in, generally we have that 8 3/4, 9-inch zone, and then we have the 2-inch mark. So we're going to split that in half. So go back to our 2-inch line. So let's call it 9. Let's just go 4.5. And let's just go 4.5. Okay, so we're just going to take 9. We're going to be generous and give ourselves 9. So now we're 4.5, 4.5. That would be our center line. So now we know 4.5. And this is where you want to double check. I'm just going to take my square off the top of this slab. Even though it's not perfect, it gives me a line. It gives me a line to the bottom of there. It kind of tells me in general where my zone is. Like I said, we could be 1/2 inch off. This is just to get it semi-center. So 8.5, 9, which is, or 8 3/4 to 9, which is 4.5. Oops. Sorry, I'm fumbling with cameras. So 8 3/4 to 9. We're just gonna, I said we're gonna be generous and take our 4.5. So now, work one end at a time. I mean, you could just eyeball it. I mean, eyeballing it looks good. If we generalize, there's 15.5. There would be 15, so we're gonna split the difference. And now I'm just measuring in general where it sits on 15. There's 7. Alright, so 7 here. But there's 14.5. It's a lot of back and forth. I mean, there if you split 16, because this is about 16 right here. 16 at 8. 15. At 7.5. See, we're just splitting things in half. Now we have a center line. So what I did here, I'm going off this edge, by the way. Here's our general center line for this piece of wood. And you see they're not perfectly flat. So that's why I go off the bottoms. Whatever my bottom's going to be, that's going to be the flatter surface to work from. So this is center down this curvy, wavy piece. Does that make sense? That's what we were doing there. So now we know we had 4.5. 4.5. Right? Are you guys following this now? You kind of see where we're going here? Alright, so 4.5. And this is gauging. This is full on gauging. 4.5. This is going to range in where my notches should be, because you saw I had that 8, and I have not decided which is going to be the front or the back yet, because I don't see exactly where the measurements are all going to line up until I go back out and check. Alright, so we have 4.5, 4.5. parallel lines. So our notch is going to be within this area. So now we go back out. That got our nice centered lines. It looks pretty centered. I think this is going to end up being my front, because I kind of like putting, but I'm not sure yet. See, that's the beauty of this whole thing, guys, is there's no written law telling you that you have to do one thing or another. So now we could just measure the width of our notch, which is 4 3/4 here, and 4 1/2. So now you split 4 1/2 in half, which would be 2 1/4. That's what we're checking. So now our center line here to there is about 7 to the edge here. Center line here to the edge is about 6 1/4. To the back, we're about 6. To the back over here, we're just under 7. So now I know that I'm between 6 and 7 to the edge of either side. And the sides aren't even. The sides, one side's smaller than the other. I don't know if you can really see that. One side is smaller. This side here is thicker than that. It's wider. So that's why we're kind of ranging in. That's why I like to use center lines and not depend on any edges or anything, because when I do my sanding, when I do my carving on it, and I will be doing some carving on it, when I do my sanding and my carving on it, that is going to round it out, because I have the whole thing together when I do that. So 2 1/2, that gives me 5. So we're going to go 2 1/4. Two and a quarter, and measure 2 lines so that you're tracking in between those lines. That's how you get parallel lines. You go boom, 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 boom. Make your one line and measure twice off of it. What do they call it? Dog legs? I don't know exactly what it's called, but it works. Always go past your work. Always go out wider. This is why I like rough work, because we're not worrying about making pencil marks or chips or overcuts, or not worried about any of that. Just draw right on top of where you're working. And so these 2 notches is going to line right up. And they don't have to be exact either. 4 1/2 is substantial enough for a notch to hold what it's going to hold. It's just going to be holding a shelf in at the end. And I don't know if you saw that other bench out there that I showed you. I put wood screws in the ends past where the hole is on thinner softwoods, because they will split, and the screws will keep that. It'll keep all that together. That's the cheat. You can also do butterfly joints. I have a nicer bench at my house where I had butterfly joints cut, and we're gonna actually do a video on butterfly joints. So now, to make sure that I go square with my square edges, I go at 37, my mark for 37. Right, there's that one. I'm going to find the one down here. And you don't need to parallel this line, but you can. And to make sure that it's parallel and square, you can always measure from one end to the other. And when I'm cutting too, I'll double check. So there's 37, and there's 37. So when I cut that, I cut the one, then I'll measure and make sure, because if I have to adjust, now would be the time to adjust. These don't matter. They don't matter how long they are. I like to leave the rough weirdness on them. That's part of the beauty of this. It's really rustic, really rough. I just love the look. Personally, this is my favorite, probably my favorite thing to do. Out of all the woodworking that I do, this is probably my favorite thing to do, because it's building, I'm making something functional, and I enjoy the process. Okay, so that concludes this part one of the series that I'm making on making slab wood benches and furniture, and getting into doing attachments. Although frustrating and tedious as it may have seemed to follow this video, I can almost guarantee you guys that most of you will come back to this video for reference, because this is where I covered the variances and measurements needed to continue throughout the series of the next videos showing how we build these and cut all the notches for these.